Hey guys, welcome back. It's the Dr. Cloud Show. This is the Friday edition, and I hope your week has gone well. I hope you've been here with us and participated and listened to some great stories that people have shared this week. This is the place where we do that, where you can call in and talk about your life, and we kind of unravel things and deal with a little of that dysfunction might have shown up somewhere. You know, bad people happen to good people. That does happen. And sometimes we don't know that there's some changes that we can make to maybe have that affect us less or differently, or even impart change to others. And so we talk about all that. So you can do that by calling me. Call this number, 844-940-2774. 844-940-2774 is the number to get on the program and share your story today as we are fighting dysfunction and developing herd immunity against dysfunction, one dynamic at a time. We're changing one dynamic at a time. And that's what we call growth, and that's what we do here. Okay, we're going to hop into it with the thought for the day about one of my favorite verses and one of my favorite concepts from the field of psychology. But before we do that, let me remind you, it is Christmas time. And so for those of you who are looking for gifts for two people, all right, ready? I mean, maybe 10 people, but let me give you two specific people. Have you ever been on the airplane and they say, in the unlikely case that the cabin loses oxygen, whatever, or loses, decompresses or whatever, the oxygen mask will fall, and then it says, what does it say? Say, put the mask on yourself first, and then turn to help the person beside you. You're not much help if you're turning blue, right? You're not much help if you're hurting. You're not much help if you're, not ready. Well, it's Christmas time, and I was going to say, give the gift of growth, give a subscription for boundaries.me to someone for Christmas. But I said, there's two people. If you haven't gotten one for yourself, give that one first, because usually when we're trying to help people, the more we can work out our own issues, the better help we can be. So that's what I would say. Go over to boundaries.me. We're bundling a bunch of stuff for Christmas specials so you can give it as gifts and also get a bunch of different content for yourself about relationships and life and stress and anxiety and depressions and lions and tigers and bears and in-laws and, adult children and bosses and blah, 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 all the stuff we run into. It's all there on boundaries.me. So go check it out. All righty. Speaking of putting the mask on yourself first, in this segment of one of my favorite verses today, which I always align with one of the most important growth producing or growth relatable or important concepts today, is get the log out of your own eye first. Now, what in the world does that mean? Well, some of you who are, if you've been a person of faith for very long, or you've hung out in the Bible, you've heard this saying, get the log out of your own eye first before you try to get the speck out of your brother or sister's eye. Well, where does that come from? What does it mean? And what does it have to do with psychology? And what does it have to do with growth? And what does that have to do with change? Well, a heck of a lot. It all goes, it's that verses from the Bible. And then you see Freud picked up on it heavily when he started to try to help people with their issues. He would find that a lot of times they were seeing and experiencing and feeling things in other people that weren't there. And these are normal people. The concept is called transference. And transference is when we have something in our head that is an experience of a person, a relationship from our past, like an authority figure, like a parent. Say you had a critical parent. Well, then sometimes we have a relationship with somebody who's really not that critical, but we experience them as critical. We experience them as abusive. We experience them as this, that, and the other. And then we get into a relationship with them that's not a real relationship. It's based on our transferring the feelings that we used to have with this other person onto them. That's one way, or something called projection. And projection is when we have a feeling that we're not really owning or aware of, and we're projecting that feeling onto somebody else, and we're seeing it on them or in them or by them. And really what we're talking about is ourselves. You might have had this experience with, when you talk about people and they just start going off on somebody, and can you believe they blah, 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 blah. And you're sitting there going, dude, that's you. You're just describing yourself. Well, the other person may or may not be like that, but you know that it's at least enhanced in the, the way they feel it. Well, that's important. It's really important for marriage. It's important for dating. It's important for work. It's important for life. And it's especially important for achievement of goals. And it's even especially important for a lot of our clinical issues. But let me talk about one of my favorite verses here where that is talked about by Jesus. Listen to this. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way that you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. So the standard that we hold somebody to, if we're going to go off on every imperfection, well, then, we're going to reap that in our own head and in our own life. And one day at the seat of the judge, it's just that's just fair, right? Got to be under the same standards. So here's what he says about judging people. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? That's what the person I was talking about. Can you believe they? What? And going, dude, you got some issues that you should look at first. You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you'll be able to see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Do not, well, it just goes on from there. So here's the point I wanted to make. Not necessarily so much about judgment, even though that is a topic I'd like to talk about one day. When we judge people, and by the way, judge is not evaluate, right? If you see something in somebody that's dysfunctional, that's downright sinful, that's destructive, that's not helpful, whatever place on the continuum, there are psychological and spiritual felonies, and then there's misdemeanors. I hate it, by the way. Please, please, please don't ever say this sentence to me. Now, I hear people say this all the time. I was like, well, all sin is sin, like it's all equal. No, it's not. It's not all equal. It hasn't been all equal since God first started to talk about it, all the way through when Jesus talked about it. I mean, remember the Pharisees? He said, you do the tithe, and you tithe, mint and dill and cumin. He said, but you have neglected the weightier measures of the law, like justice and mercy and faithfulness. I mean, somebody, skips making a donation one week. That's not the same as if they go, have adultery or do something oppressive or unjust. They're not the same. So just wanted to get that out of the way. That's a different rant because I hear people say that all the time. But this thing about judgment, it's not wrong to see something wrong. That's not what judgment is. The judge looks at all the evidence and looks at the infractions, and the judge evaluates that, and the judge, renders a judgment. Right? So it's not about what you're seeing. It's about what position you are in to play God and render a judgment on that person, because you don't know where they're coming from. You don't know what's happened to them, or the other direction. You don't know how many chances they've blown off, and you're giving them one too many. He might be too lenient on them. So, some people say, well, I don't want to judge, and they feel bad about seeing that somebody is clearly in the wrong. There's nothing wrong with evaluating behavior. What's wrong is putting ourselves above that other person, looking down on them, and judging them as if we're up here and they're down there. Another place, many places in the Bible, God calls this the raised eyebrow, which is basically, I think, the Hebrew word for narcissism. It's when you're above somebody, looking down at them like you're better than them. That's arrogance and all of that. So we don't want to do that. But here's the point of today. It's the order. He said, get the log out of our own eye first so that you can see clearly. So that you can see clearly. Now, by the way, did I don't know if did I give out the number? I think we have a line open, 844-940-2774. 844-940-2774 is the number to call to get on the program. 844-940-2774. If you call us and give us your number, we'll call you. Okay, same thing. All right, so here's the problem. We have crap in our heads that is just distorting our view of somebody. How many times you ever been in a gathering? This happens in work settings all the time. Somebody will say this, and somebody have this idea, and somebody have this idea, and then the boss might say this. And then one person leaves the meeting and says, I can't believe how critical she is. I can't believe how, and somebody else going, well, I didn't hear it that way. Didn't seem that way to me. Just was, normal feedback. Well, there you go. See, sometimes, and this isn't a moral thing, sometimes we're walking around with just unfinished woundedness, and we hear things in ways that it's like value add to them. Like somebody was being mean when they really weren't. Or sometimes the flip side of that. I mean, somebody can be really enabling, and the log in their own eye is that they are so freaking codependent that they can't even see that the person that they're with is being a real, what? Everybody else is going, why do you let him get away with that? Well, they just had a hard life, or no, you got some issues. You got some issues in having difficulty confronting somebody. So it can go in either direction. This isn't just that we over confront or over feel things. We can under confront and under feel things. And that can be the way it happens as well. So what about this? What about when you feel like, well, that person really doesn't like me? And the other person? Or somebody else knows the other person? They go, no, I talked to them. They really do like you a lot. Well, why do you feel that way? Well, maybe there's something inside from a past relationship, as Transference would tell us, that it's distorting my view that when they're quiet, maybe that's because they're introverted, not because they're sitting there thinking critical thoughts about me. And what I've seen is, in doing long-term therapy for a lot of years with a lot of people, it is amazing how the views of other people in their life change as they get well. They begin to see certain kinds of people that they thought were jerks as really enjoyable, or certain people that they thought were really cute as really narcissistic, gaslighting, toxic freaks that they should avoid. They used to fall in love with them. And now they're like calling 911 every time they see them, because they're finally healthy enough to see what a crazy person these people are. But you got to get your vision cleared up before you try to hand the oxygen to the person on the journey with you. So I say all this to say a couple things. Number one, when we're in a relationship or have an interaction with somebody, we should always question our perceptions. Always. Am I seeing this right? Am I understanding this right? Am I overreacting? Is this a sensitive place for me? Do I need to go sleep on it? I can't tell you how many times in my own life I've had a difficult like interaction, in some business setting or something, and it gets pretty heated, and because in some, it's just high stakes, and everybody's and then I've gone away from the meeting, and sometime the next day I'm going, he did have a point. There's some truth to what he or she was saying. But in the moment, I couldn't see it. I've had that happen 10,000 times. Because your brain starts to make other associations and starts to calm down. And so I just want to remind us, like Freud said, and like Jesus said, and like any other psychologist that's worth their shingle, is just because you're feeling something doesn't mean it's true. And just because you're seeing something doesn't mean it's true. And the trick is to treat it as true when it's not true. In other words, this is the good part of the phrase, well, that's my truth. Well, that's true. It is my truth in that that's how I'm experiencing it. But we also have to hold that in relationship to there is external reality that my truth may be different than. And that's what's gotten lost. I think this started happening in the field of psychology back in, I'm going to call it the 90s-ish, sort of. Yeah, right around there. It started really gaining more. There's a whole field of intersubjectivity and a lot of other kind of things that started happening where somebody's subjective reality was reality. And a lot of the psychologists started to move in the direction of, and this is very important in one sense, that people's feelings must be validated in order to be healed and worked with and understood and all that. And it is true. It is true that they feel that way. But when we draw a link from the way that somebody feels to that is reality, then we've lost reality. Because you could put 5 people in a room and 4 of them are going to see it differently than the 5th one. So what is reality? If we're making subjective reality reality. There's a lot of problems with that from both sides. But what I'm saying is we have to be humble enough in a relationship to ask the question, did they mean it that way? Am I overreacting? But you're not overreacting, are you? Because I just said what you're feeling is true. Now we're talking about getting the log out, right? No, I do feel put down. You're right, you do, and you were, and that's true. But it was your mother or your father or your brother or your aunt or grandmother or somebody that wound is not yet healed. And so now when other people give you feedback or criticize you, you do feel put down. That is true. So we got to find out the truth of where that comes from and work through that and resolve it. I'll never forget this one example. This woman came to see me about her abusive, controlling, angry, a lot of other words, husband. And the way she described him I mean, the guy was like, you know, scariest. I mean, he should have been, you know, on some James Bond movie is, from the other side, like just evil, scary person that, will cut your ears off or something. And so she's describing him, and she's has all this fear about, and she can't speak up, and so I said, well, I think we need to get him in here. And she goes, no, 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 we can't. No. I said, no, I'd like to talk to him. And she goes, no, because it would be too frightening. And the way she was describing it, she really felt like I was going to be in danger if I were to confront him with anything of this and the other. And so I'm checking this out, and it doesn't sound exactly quite right. And I said, well, if that happens, I'll tell him to leave. Well, no, you better not do that, because then well, if that happens, I'll call the police. And she goes, well, I don't know. Okay, I'll call the army. Okay. And it's like in her head, there was nobody strong enough to contain how powerful this guy was. And so I said, well, I still want to get him in here. So she agreed to it. And she came in. She came in first and talked to him, kind of preparing her for this. And so then he shows up, and I go out in the waiting room, and I meet this guy. And I said, are you Mr. So-and-so? He goes, and he gets up and he stands up and he goes, hello, Dr. Clown. It's so nice to meet you. And he's like this little, I don't know what the word would be. Not timid, but kind of anything but Terminator. And I mean, I had seen Transference before, obviously, but that's an example of what I'm talking about. And I've seen people be afraid of people that they don't need to be afraid of. There are people you should be afraid of, by the way. There are people you shouldn't be in the same room with. So don't write me emails and saying, so you're saying I'm dreaming all this up about my abusive. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying in this particular case, that was a distortion. And I've seen people be afraid to give their opinion, or be afraid to be assertive, or be afraid to say no, and all of that, when they were not in any danger physically or psychologically, but they were in their own heads because they hadn't worked through the stuff in their own heads first. So this can happen a number of ways. Let me give you a couple of things to think about. Number one, you may be disowning your own strengths. The log in your own eye that you might have to get out of your own eye is the distortion. Some people see other people as powerful because they're denying their own power and projecting it onto the other. And so you see the other person as powerful because you've diminished yourself. That's where the old phrase came back. Well, why do you give them so much power? All you have to do is say no, right? So you may be negating and denying your own power, your own thoughts, your own opinions, and all of that. Number two, it might be old woundedness. Number three, it might be that we're in denial about something. And we just don't want to look at our own issues. That's human. It's a problem, but it's human. So anyway, judge not, lest you be judged. But that doesn't mean don't evaluate people. We have to evaluate people, or you're going to get in train wreck relationships all the time, because you want to avoid unsafe people. Nor will you not confront problems in relationships that are real problems. So I'm all about confronting. He does say after we get the log out. And see, we're not going to confront well until we get the log out either. So this is why putting the mask on ourselves first. Before you go criticizing, then make sure you're ready. That may be even getting stronger, not just less judgmental. And sometimes if you go to my webinar on the art of confrontation, one of the things I talk about in the webinar when you have to do an intervention, difficult person, or a confrontation of some sort, is before you do that is to go bleed off all the emotion first. Get the log out of your own eye first. In other words, I don't want you going in there subject to too much pain, because it's going to keep you from doing the confrontation you need to oftentimes. If you want to look at that, it's called The Art of Confrontation. It's on boundaries.me website. in the store. Okay, so there's our verse for the day. Get the log out of our own eye first. And the psychological idea of transference and other made for TV distortions. All right, let's go to the phones. Jessica is calling us from Ohio, listens on Instagram. Jessica, welcome to the Dr. Cloud Show.
Hi, thanks, Dr. Cloud. How are you?
Not too bad. I'm recovering well from my surgery, apparently, and less pain. Not out of the woods yet, but I will be. Thank you.
So glad to hear.
So tell me how I can help you.
Well, I'm hoping maybe you can give me a little bit more clarity or help me find some direction. My husband left 8 months ago. I came home one day, there was a letter, and he was gone. We've kind of...
Whoa.
He left...
You just came home one day and got a letter?
Mm-hmm.
That's terrible.
Yes, I agree.
How long were you married?
It's 6 years now at this point.
No signs, no process, no, honey, I want to work on some stuff, nothing like that. He just one day walked out.
There's been issues throughout the marriage, a lot of resentment and crushed dreams, unexpected. My health is very poor, and he knew that before we got married, but we thought I would get better, and you would buy the house and have the kids and live the dream. And instead I got worse, and we pinched the pennies, and he worked his butt off, and no kids came and no house came. And so there was a lot of resentment there. And he tried to pull away a couple times and throughout the marriage, and then eventually just basically left emotionally, I think, along the way. So it was not expected at that time. I thought we were finally at a place of staying, at least physically. So it did catch me off guard.
Yeah, that's a brutal journey.
It definitely has been. We've been in communication throughout the past several months, and he was debating if he would come back or not. And then I could tell at one point he had shut off. He was not planning to come back. So I received, he filed divorce about a month ago, and I wasn't sure how to handle it biblically speaking, because I think he has wandered from the faith. Well, yes, from the lifestyle that I'm aware he's living, but I am still very much in it. And so at first I told him, I'm not able to give you a divorce, but I have found a peace with giving him that. It's not me leaving him. And my attorney has told me there's a way where it's kind of, we can do it one-sided. It shows he divorced me. I peacefully let him go. I know the scripture says if the unbelieving wants to leave, basically be a peacemaker, let them go. So that's kind of where I sat with that.
Right. So what's the question then?
So my question is, I don't work because of my health. So I'm fully dependent on him financially. And so everyone is telling me, well, you need to get support, at least until you can figure this out, and I did not want to counter sue him, because I know that there's scriptures on, not suing, and I realize he's the one taking me, and
scriptures on
but
what?
I didn't want to, like the scripture about not suing, or I guess there's a scripture on not taking your brother to court, right? But I'm not taking him; he's taking me.
Oh, okay.
But the one,
not only that. There's a whole nother aspect of biblical law that relates to this scenario that's not the same as suing somebody over a business dispute. You know,
I guess that's why I'm trying to get greater understanding, because when I read, was it in the Beatitudes, and it's like, oh, if they sue you for your shirt, give them this. And I'm like, so where is my right to ask or to be like, well, you need to give me this if the Bible says, and there's.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you asked this, because it's actually not your right. It's something that God instituted. You know, when you go to Matthew, is it like 19 or 20 or wherever, Jesus is talking about divorce, when in the argument with the Pharisees, and also in, I think in Matthew 5, you'll know, you can find this. But he's asked the question by the Pharisees, you know, Moses, he responds, he says, you know, when Moses granted them to give her a certificate of divorce, do you remember reading that?
Yeah.
That was instituted for the protection of the woman, so that she would be materially taken care of. See, the way it was men had kind of almost property rights over women, and they could just discard them, say, I divorce you. And she was like left without anything. And so what the certificate of divorce did, that Moses instituted, was actually for the protection of the woman's financial security, because she would have been left without anything. And so the biblical law about the certificate of the divorce was primarily to protect women financially, exactly like you're talking about. And then when you go over to is it in Malachi or wherever it is, and you hear Christians quote this all the time. You know, the phrase that says God hates divorce. Have you ever heard that?
Mm-hmm.
That's actually not what the passage says. It's about the hatred of the woman God through what the man does to her in that scenario. So it's a passage about justice for her. And so you're perfectly within your rights to make sure that you protect yourself financially from the dissolution of a union where everything belonged to both of you.
So if he, because at this point, like, my attorney said she would like submit, like we would answer and ask for what we need, but that since I didn't do a countersuit, like he can walk away if he says, oh, well, I don't want that. He can walk away at any time, and then I have nothing. So you're saying there's not something wrong with me?
Not biblically. I'm not an attorney. I can't give you legal advice, but I can answer the Bible question. The Bible question is that God was always, you know, trying to protect the woman who got abandoned. So I wouldn't have any problem with that.
So how can I work on my emotional side where I still have hope and stand the ground that I realize? I say I know God's will is for husband and wife to stay together, but I realize man has his own free will as well. Right. So I'm being realistic about that. But my hope and my prayer is, whether it's before a divorce is final or after, that the Lord will bring us back together. And I'm afraid of causing upset, because he's made it very clear he just wants his money and he wants out. And I'm just an expense. So it makes me very uncomfortable asking for any kind of money from him.
Oh,
so I'm having that struggle as well.
Yeah, look, if he's just seeing you as an expense and not even treating you as a person and having that attitude, I mean, first of all, if the goal were to get him back, then generally speaking, that's not going to happen. Generally speaking, the likelihood of that happening is going to be higher by your showing strength and saying, I will not be treated like a non-person the likelihood is more that that would wake him up than to just roll over and, and let him get away with not treating you like a person. Besides, there's, if he's treating you like a non-person, he's not in any way kind of showing any kind of signs that he's headed back. So I think
it's no.
Yeah, and I would not worry that, standing up for yourself is going to reduce the chances of his having a wake up call. If anything, it could possibly help, but I would make sure that you're taking care of yourself. That's the way I would look at it. Okay. Sorry, I've got to go talk to some other people, but I'm sorry you've been through this, but you can rest assured, both in Paul's writings and, the way that various aspects of the scriptures look at this, an abandoned woman is very, very near to God's heart, and he would want you protected and taken care of. Abandoned or alone women are one of the protected groups in the Bible. Widows, for example, and others. So I think God has your heart close to him. Okay, thank you for your call.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry that you have gone through that. That's a tough one. A lot to say about that one. But I would say this, that last point, by and large, in every relationship, and this is from kind of really toxic people all the way to kind of just self-centered people. I think there are self-centered people that are not trying to be toxic, even though they end up being toxic, but they're not like poison. They just have a lot of collateral damage that they inflict. But in either case, I think the chances of people being more, or say it a different way, the chances of people being abandoned are greater the more passive they are than when they take a position of strength. That's kind of something that just is true. It's just true. Okay, let's go to Nicole calling from Instagram, California. Has a dating question. Nicole, welcome to the program.
Hi, Dr. Cloud.
Hey there. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Tell me how I can help you.
So, I just started dating. I got divorced 3 years ago. So I started dating 2 months ago.
Okay. How long were you married?
I was married for 7 years.
Okay. 3 years ago, started dating 2 months ago. So you took some time and did some recovery and worked on yourself and all that?
I did. Yes, I did.
All righty. Good
went
for
to the
you.
Ultimate Leadership Workshop. So thank you. So I did all of that. And then I just felt like God, it was time for me to get out there. So I joined the dating app and I've gone, yeah, I was super excited until I met Christopher. So we've been on 6 dates, and like 6 really good dates. We went to the Dodger wild card game and really great chemistry, really great conversation. He checks a lot of boxes. On our 6th date, we went out to dinner and went to the movies, and, I asked him the question, what are we? And he said, looks me in my eyeballs. Dr. Cloud says, Nicole, you're the one for me. I want to marry you. And I was like, oh my gosh, how do you know that? He's like, I just know. He's like, I want to be exclusive. He's like, I'm all in. Are you all in? And I'm feeling the same way about him. So I tell him I'm all in. Let's be exclusive. Didn't sleep with him, none of that. But I texted him the next day and I said, thank you so much for dinner last night. I know it was expensive. I really enjoyed my time with you.
Wait, hold on. You talked a little fast. Hang on. Wait, stop.
Oh, sorry.
You texted, talk a little more slowly. You texted him the next day and said what?
Thank you so much for dinner last night. I know it was expensive. I had a really good time with you. And then he texted back, of course, it was a great break from the chaos that is going on in our lives. And I texted back absolutely. And then Dr. Cloud, I have not heard from this man in 7 days. So I texted him yesterday and I said, hey, Christopher, smiley face. I know you have a lot going on and I'm 100% wanting and willing to be flexible, but I have a lot going on too. I don't want to pursue this if you're not interested. Maybe you just don't like texting or talking during the week. But if we are all in and you want to
Wait a minute. Hold
exclusive,
on a second. Let me get my facts straight.
Okay.
The last time you had texted was your response about dinner?
Yes.
So there was total nothing for a week. You hadn't texted at that point yet?
Nope.
Okay. So total darkness for 7 days.
Yes.
And then you text and say what you said. All right, go ahead.
Yep. And so then I said, I don't want to date other men. I like you, but it's hard for me to hear you tell me I'm the one and not hear from you. I feel so stupid for even sending this text, but here you go. And that was yesterday, and I have not heard from him still. So
is he alive? I mean, do you know he's okay?
Well, so last night I texted him. I called his phone, and he didn't pick up. And so I texted him, hey, are you okay? Do you need me? ? Let me know. So, you know, I haven't met his family, so I don't, you know he doesn't have social media except for Facebook, but he never goes on there. So I don't know.
Do you know his friends? It sounds like a missing person. I mean, there are such things as getting ghosted, but I would.
Yeah.
Do you have any way of knowing that he's all right?
No, I don't have any way of knowing. I mean, I guess I could, you know, on his Facebook, it says who his, you know, mom is and friend, but I don't want to, you know, I guess I could reach out to them, but I feel like I haven't met them at all. So I don't.
You don't know where he lives? You don't know where he lives?
No, I haven't been to his house. I mean, I know that
where he works?
He just sold his house in Casino Hills. I know that I don't know the name of his company. No.
Wow. Well, people do get ghosted. This happens. I mean, I actually know of one scenario, friend of a friend, where they were dating for like quite a while, and then he proposed and gave her a ring, and she never heard from him again.
Wow.
So it's not outside scope of reality. It does happen. But it also happens that, somebody slips and falls and hits her head and is unconscious or something. I mean, we don't even know where he is, right? So that's why I bring that up. But let's assume he's okay. Okay.
Okay.
It is possible to conceive of a scenario where, I hate to say this because I don't like this. It's so impossibly possible. It's possible to conceive of a scenario where he's a good guy, whatever this tapped into, he's scared himself and he's regrouping. But I don't even like that possibility, even though it is possible. I don't like it because even if that's true, what that says about his readiness for being in a relationship is like dooming. It's like anybody that would do this consciously is just not ready, probably. Even if he came back and said, I'm sorry, you would at least, this is a huge yellow flag that you would want to take a long time to work out. You follow me?
I do. Thank you.
I just don't like it. period. I can't find anything in here that I like. I mean, that would, from a guy that's stable enough to get married. Now, maybe he's a good guy and he's wounded and he's got some smothering fears or phobias or whatever this tapped into that he's got to work out. And maybe at one point he could get over that. That happens. But I still don't. But at this point, to say in any kind of probability, this is a guy that's ready for a serious commitment when he won't even respond and say, look, I scared myself, or I got to thinking I'd like a couple of days. But just to ghost you, no way. I would not. I mean, I'd pull in the lines.
Thank you. It was surprising because on our first date, we went to the Dodger game. We spent, quite a long time together there, and it was so much fun. And then we'd gone on, it was our 6th date, and he drove out here. Definitely checks off a lot of boxes. He's 8 years older than me. And he checks off all the boxes, and he looked me, Dr. Cloud, in my actual eyeballs and said, I know that you're the one for me. I want to marry you. I'm all in. Are you all in? Now, this was after, it was like getting more physical, making out and all the stuff. But I was like, hold on, what are we? Like, what are we doing? Because this is, we've only gone on 6 dates. So what are we? And that's where he told me what he told me. And I was good with it. I mean, I was willing to be exclusive and to see where this goes. And then, so I guess, I don't know if I know that men, but I do tend, like the last man that I dated also was avoiding, like not wanting to commit. And so I'm trying to think about if I'm attracting men that have commitment issues. Because after my marriage, I met another man, and it was too soon after my marriage, and we dated, and he also wasn't ready to commit.
It's possible.
So that's where
there's no shortage. There's no shortage of those to begin with, but it may mean but it may mean that you do. So let's put it this way: there are men that are not ready to commit or unwilling to commit or whatever. That just is a pool of people, right? That exists. There are dynamics that make that kind of person attractive to somebody in the beginning instead of seeing it and running away. And that may be something you want to get with a good therapist and talk about. What is it that I start to? It's sort of like the log in the eye that I began to show with. Why am I blind to some things that I should be seeing? That there are signs. Sometimes confusing longing for love, sometimes not really evaluating your feelings after you're with somebody to was that just infatuation, or do I really feel some kind of contentment or fulfillment inside after being with this person? That's a confusion that people make sometimes. And so, yeah, you might want to look at that you might not be able to spot them soon enough, but I wouldn't worry about attracting them on a first or second date. They're just out there.
Do you think that I should feel bad for talking to other men on the dating apps right now and going on dates?
Not at all.
Okay, because we said we were going to be exclusive, and I was willing to do that, but I haven't heard.
Yeah,
from
but
him.
you didn't know. You didn't know
exclusive.
You didn't know exclusive meant that he was going to exclude you from his life. That's not what exclusive means. This is
okay.
What do you? Okay, if you feel bad, send him another text and say, you know what, you got 3 days to respond, or I'm back on the market. You could do that, or you got 1 day.
Is that too needy? Is that too? Because I sent him a text and then I called him? Is it? Do I seem like a psychopath if I text him again?
No, I would say.
Like
I would say
like
at this point, I'm concerned for your safety. Just at least let me know that you're okay. and I'll never call you again. But if I don't hear from you, I'm concerned for your safety, and I might have to call the police and do a missing persons thing or something. I don't know. But no, it's not needy to want clarification from a guy that you just had a very serious connection with and has disappeared. That's not needy at all.
And
That's
it's not me
self-respect.
chasing him or okay.
No, you're just asking for reality. RSVP, dude.
Yeah, I wouldn't be like this if we had just gone on a date and he hadn't texted me. I'd say, okay, well, maybe but it's confusing to me because he said all the stuff.
I got it. I understand. And I'm just telling you, it's not needy for you to question that. Get clarification. Say, if I don't hear from you, I'm done. So you got 24 hours or something. Okay? Got to run up against the clock.
Thank you, Dr. Cloud. Thank you.
Okay, stay out there. Don't give up just because you had one bad, experience. Thank you for your call. Oh my goodness. We got just a few minutes here. I want to get to a couple of the questions that people have texted in with. How can we here we go. What are your thoughts on childhood emotional neglect? I believe it's one of the reasons for my codependency and lack of boundaries. Absolutely, that can be true. The way childhood emotional neglect is written, sounds like as a syndrome, right? But that's just a reality that people can be neglected in childhood in a variety of reasons. You can be neglected by a parent that's right there all the time. There was one of the old kind of when people were first starting to write a lot about narcissism. There was a book called The Drama of the Gifted Child back in the 70s, 80s. That was about how kids with talents, for example, and the gifted kids were invisible kids because their parents just saw them as kind of an extension of themselves. Well, that's emotional neglect. Because if you're a trophy child, then you're not who you are. And so emotional neglect, basically what it means is that your needs and emotional states were neglected, right? So if they're neglected, that leaves you in a needy position, and codependency can come from being at risk of being abandoned or alone. And so you start to give in to people and not have boundaries because of the fear of aloneness or abandonment. That's why if you go to the boundaries book, when John and I wrote that path out there, the first step is not setting boundaries. The first step is getting plugged in. So you have the support system and you're not emotionally neglected now while you're trying to set boundaries with somebody who may reject you or there may be a conflict with. So it's a very important question, and make sure you go get that taken care of. Okay. What do you think of the Enneagram, Dr. Cloud? Can this be useful in lives? That is a long conversation because it's gotten so much popularity out there now. I kind of make the distinction between the Enneagram and some other kinds of more validated and constructed in different ways kind of assessments. It's kind of a typology instrument similar to Myers-Briggs and some of the others like that. It's I could say a lot about this because there's a lot to talk about here. But your question, I'll just try to answer your question in the second part. It says, can this be useful in lives? One of the places I think that typology tests can be useful is in people communicating with each other and also beginning to talk about themselves. There's something about, it's interesting. You take a typology test and the way they're built is different than like the MMPI or other kind of complicated regression analyses and covariance loadings and predictive validity, all that kind of stuff. The typology tests, in large part, do you like A or B? Well, I like B. And then you get the results and the test says you like B. Well, I told it this, right? So It didn't kind of diagnose me. It kind of told me what I told it, which is interesting when you think about it, because there's something very useful about getting this instrument that says, oh, here's what it says about me. Now that's what you told it, right? So in one sense we go, well, yeah, we knew you were like that, or I knew you were like that, or didn't you know you were like that? And some people go, oh yeah, this matches me perfectly. But some people literally are like, whoa, this is so amazing, because it gives them new knowledge about themselves. So yeah, it can be useful to people to have an objective piece of paper, look out there and say, oh, they usually say, that's why I'm like that. I'm an 8 or I'm a 5 or whatever. Well, that's not why you're like that, but that is what you're like. Right? And so it can be useful. And it also can be useful for people to understand each other. I've seen it, be very, very helpful. People say, oh, now I get it. You're like that because you're like that. And so they start to understand and accept people in the way that they are, and they have something objective to talk about. So in answer to your question, can it be useful? Absolutely useful, because people can talk about themselves and they can talk about each other, and it kind of reduces the threat a little bit because it kind of objectifies it. Now it's a whole nother conversation from a psychometric perspective. If you talk to psychologists who build assessment tools, kind of what it's able to do and what it's not do, and that's why we have a lot of different tests, and that's why a good psychometrician would give different kind of instruments when they're trying to ascertain different kinds of things. But can it be useful? I've seen it be very useful, would be the answer. All righty, guys. We are out of time. It's been a good week. It's been great to be with you. We will be here next week. I think, let me see. I shudder in my recovery time here when I don't exactly know our times and all that kind of stuff, but roughly there's going to be some shows next week. So just watch the different platforms. We'll get in there sometime. Okay. It's good to be with you. Go over to boundaries.me and check out the Christmas specials that we have. There's a lot going on over there. Go to www.boundaries.me. We have bundled a bunch of different opportunities for you to get great content and study up on how you are doing. Study up on what the next steps are in getting over anxiety, depression, addictions. What do you do about those? Or dealing with somebody that is, or toxic people, or dealing with a narcissist, or having family conflict, or reaching your goals, or working out relationships. It's all of that stuff. You can find it on boundaries.me by becoming a subscriber. Okay, guys, have a good weekend.